Everyone. Today we are going to discuss a very beautiful poem written by Robert Frost. The title of the poem is Mending Wall. This poem was written by Robert Frost in 1914. Robert Frost, a modern poet of American origin, has written this poem with humanism and love in his mind. This poem has a very great universal appeal. This poem, in fact, tries to foreground the futility of creating a wall, erecting a wall, because wall is in fact a restriction. Now we have in our society numerous walls which has been constructed, created artificially by our society. The wall of caste, the wall of race, the wall of money, the wall of gender. Now these are all different walls. So in a way, this poem is a debate between humanism on one side and materialism on the other. This poem has been written by the poet in a blank verse, and this poem is conversational in nature. This poem is about two neighbors coming together each spring to mend wall. The poem begins with the speaker describing natural forces that damage the stone wall between his and his neighbor's property. Every spring, both men meet to repair the wall, walking along opposite sides while replacing fallen stones. The speaker questions the wall's necessity, noting that his apple tree won't eat his neighbor's pine cones, but the neighbor merely repeats the proverb, good fences make good neighbors. This poem can be read as a commentary on human nature and tendency to build and maintain barriers, as well as the conflict between individualism and community. Now, the text of Mending Wall. This poem was written by Robert Frost in 1914. Something there is that does not love a wall. Now, what that something is, perhaps nature. Now, indirectly or obliquely, the poet is referring to nature, God, destiny. Now, the wall is destined to be demolished because the wall perhaps is not entertained by divinity as well as nature. Something there is that does not love a wall. Now, nature does not entertain the very idea of constructing a wall because wall means barrier, wall means boundaries. That sends the frozen ground swell under it. Now, every year, the wall is demolished. There are ruptures between the wall, and God knows how that rupture, how that demolition of the wall takes place, and spills the upper boulder in the sun. The poet says that every spring, when they come, they found the wall is damaged. It means that nature is not at all happy with the idea of human being to create boundaries among themselves, to create wall among themselves, and make gaps even two can pass abreast. Now every year when the poet and his neighbor visits their home, they found that the wall is damaged from many places. The work of hunter is another thing. The wall which has been mended, which has been erected by Frost and his neighbor. I have come after them and made repair where they have left not one stone on a stone. Now the poet says that every spring when he visits his home, he found that the wall is damaged. Now he knew that perhaps nature is not entertaining the very idea of creating artificial wall because wall creates rift, wall creates boundaries, whereas nature does not entertain the artificial construct of human being in terms of caste, creed, and community. But they would have the rabbit out of hiding to please the yelping dogs, the gaps I mean. Now the poet says that although he is not sure, but perhaps the gap has been the handiwork of the hunters. Because in search of rabbit, the hunters perhaps used to come in the premises of the poet with the yelping dogs. So it might be their handiwork, but the poet is pretty not sure enough. How the gap has been made in the wall, which was constructed by himself and his neighbor in last spring. No one has seen them made or heard them made. Now, how the gap has been emanated in the newly constructed wall, only God knows, only nature knows, because nobody has seen as to whose handiwork is this, who is responsible for making the gap or demolition of the wall. But at spring, mending time, we find them there. Author says that everywhere when they visit their home, they found gaps in their wall. They found the damaged wall. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. Now it appears if that the relationship between the neighbor and the poet is quite formal one. They are not friendly. Their their relationship is not harmonious but formal. And when the neighbor and poet found that the wall has been damaged, now they come to a mutual understanding that this is high time that the damaged wall must be repaired once again. We keep the wall between us as we go. Now they reached a mutual understanding that the necessity of wall is there because for them wall means secrecy, wall means privacy, and both of them mutually accepts the the importance of privacy, the importance of secrecy between them, and therefore they came to an understanding that the wall should be mended, the wall should be repaired. To each the boulders that have fallen to each. Now, at many parts, at many places, the boulders has been fallen down because the wall the poet is talking about is not the wall which has been constructed out of brick and cement. In fact, this is the wall which has been constructed with the help of stone boulders. So every year they found that the stone boulders are falling down. This might be the handiwork of hunters or whose handiwork it is. Perhaps it is merely the matter of speculation. But the poet comes to the conclusion that it appears as if that the nature, the God, the divinity is not entertaining the very idea of constructing a wall because wall is an artificial construct. The poet and his neighbor, they are mending wall. And some are lobes and some so nearly balls. Now these are the different shapes of the stone. Some are round in shape, some are flat in shape. We have to use a spell to make them balance. And both of them, the poet as well as his neighbor, they tried to once again reconstruct the damaged wall. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough with handling them. Now, the poet acknowledges that mending wall is not a very easy exercise. It requires huge amount of physical work. And while mending wall, their fingers, their hands become rough. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game. On one on a side, it comes a little more. Now both of them, they are standing on their ground, on their respective sides, and they are trying to mend wall, create wall, repair wall, which has been damaged by nature. Now these are walls made up of stones. There where it is, we do not need the wall. Now somewhere the author is not comfortable with the idea of wall. He says that the wall is against humanism. The wall is uh, against the very idea of universality, because we all are one, and our predicament is one as well. Our interests are one as well. So what is the use of the wall? He is all pine and I am apple orchard. Author says that as far as the premises of my neighbor is concerned, only pine trees are there. Whereas in my area, in my premises, only apple orchards are there. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pine, I tell him. Now the poet wants to inculcate into the mind of the neighbor that the creation of the wall is a futile exercise, because as far as our trees are concerned, the tree are part of nature, and nature prefers to reside in harmony. Poet further adds that he tried to convince his neighbor that in his part only pine trees are there, whereas in the premises of the poet only apple orchards are there, and the apple orchards will not trespass their boundary in order to harm the pine tree of the neighbor. But as far as the neighbor is concerned, he only says good fences make good neighbors. So in a way, the neighbor is the spokesperson of materialism, capitalism. In the name of privacy, he deliberately wanted to erect the wall. Wall. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Now, author says that I love natural things. I love spring season. I love freedom, emancipation, and liberty. And the poet further adds that I am not sure enough whether I will be able to influence the prejudiced mind of my neighbor, because my neighbor is prejudiced. He perhaps is not swept by the notion of humanism and nature. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it? Where there are cows, but here there are no cows. Author says that cows are not there in his premises or in my premises. Therefore, there is no direct threat. Still, every spring we come together and we come to a harmony, we come to a consensus that we should try to mend wall, we should try to repair wall which has been damaged. Before I built a wall, I would ask to know what I was walling in or walling out. Now, the poet is reflecting upon the idea of the utility of a wall. The poet says that if I am engrossed in erecting a wall, in constructing a wall. After all, whom I am apprehensive of, whom I am scared of, whom I want not to enter into my premise. So I am walling out whom am, and I am walling in whom, and to whom I was like to give offense. Means after all, why actually I am creating this wall? Whom I do not want to entertain into my premises. Now the poet is reflecting upon these ideas, these concepts. Something there is that does not love a wall. Now, once again, the poet becomes reflective. The poet is contemplating about the scenario as to who is responsible for the demolishing of this wall. That wants it down. Author says that perhaps God is not entertaining. Christ is not entertaining. Nature is not entertaining the very idea of mending wall, the very idea of constructing wall. But as far as we human beings are concerned, in the name of privacy, in the name of secrecy, every year we are engrossed in mending wall, in repairing wall, which has been damaged, God knows how. I could say elves to him, but it is not elves exactly, and I would rather, he said, it for himself. I see him there. The poet says that my neighbor perhaps is elves. Elf means some supernatural being, or some stone age savage. Now, what type of person, what type of persona my neighbor is, I I am unable to understand. But the poet says I could say elves to him, but it's not elves exactly. And I would rather he said it for himself. I see him there, wall. Bring a stone, grasped firmly by the top, in each hand, like an old stone savage armed. The poet says that as far as my neighbor is concerned, he took utmost interest in repairing the wall, and while doing so, he put forth very great effort. He caught hold of the stone by himself in order to repair the damaged wall. And while doing so, he seems to me a stone is savage, a brute, an illiterate, uncivilized person. But unfortunately, my neighbor could not understand this. He moves in darkness as it seems to me, not of woods only and the shade of the trees. He will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well. He says again, good fences make good neighbors. Now, finally, perhaps the author, the poet, comes to a conclusion that this very idea of wall, this very idea of fences, this very idea of restriction, of boundaries has been engraved in the mind of my neighbor by his father. His father too entertained the idea of boundary, idea of wall, because he must be the follower of capitalism or materialism. So because of the father of the neighbor, my neighbor is prejudiced as well. He does not entertain the idea of humanism. He do not want to mingle with people. He is scared of mingling. He is apprehensive of mixing with people. And therefore, whenever I wanted to impress upon him the futility of creating the wall, the futility of mending wall, the futility of repairing wall, but my neighbor do not want to listen to me because somewhere he is biased, he is prejudiced, and every time he says that good fences make good neighbors. So this is all about this beautiful video. Hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you very much.